Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you clicked on this video, I assume you're hoping that I'm going to give you an answer on how to know if you're transgender or want to take steps towards transitioning, whatever that may mean to you. And I will say right off the bat, even though I'll probably lose some viewers, that I cannot give you that answer. There is no answer to know for certain whether or not you're trans. I think that for my own self, I wanted to so badly know that answer. I wanted someone else to tell me that I was trans, which, as a side note, probably means that you're trans. But aside from that, I think that there was just such a strong desire that I had for a doctor or a blood test or someone or something to kind of give me the permission to transition. And that's just not something that that's just not how this works, and I don't think that anyone can really tell you whether or not you're trans or whether or not transition is the right thing for you. But having said that, I think that there are certainly ways you can trust that the answers do truly lie in you, and that the most important thing to remember is that time heals all wounds, and the same thing is true for gender. I think time kind of answers all gender questions. I think that it takes a really long time to develop a strong sense of self and to develop your gender. The same way it would take for a long time for, a cis man or a cis woman to become a man or become a woman. Whatever that may mean to them, whatever it means culturally. So I think that, as trans people, especially trans people that transition, later on in life, I think, I tend to forget that, and I think a lot of people, in their early 30s that might be transitioning tend to forget that as well, that it really is a long process. It's a lifelong process. I think we're always sort of transitioning one way or the other, and we're always growing into ourselves. So I think if you can appreciate that fact right off the bat, that is sort of 95% of the battle, so to speak. And then the rest of it is sort of things, steps that you can take to feel more comfortable in your body, or to feel more comfortable socially, or, in some instances to feel safer to kind of, passing is such a controversial topic, but at the same time, I think that there's something to be said for the importance of people feeling safe, because there is such backlash within the trans community or towards the trans community who are gender nonconforming or not conventionally passing. There's unfortunately a lot of pushback that comes to that. So just for fun, I wanted to share a picture of me from 2012. This picture is from a Halloween party, and looking at this picture now, it is a very bizarre feeling to see someone who is me. I remember taking that picture. I remember being in that body and in that moment, but looking back on that picture and that person, it's hard to believe that it's me, and it's fun to look back on those things. And it's I know some people don't like to show or look at older pictures of themselves. I don't love to do it with video, but when it comes to pictures, I find it's fun to look at what has changed, and it's also fun to hear and see other people's reactions. And usually the bigger the reaction, the more I feel like, well, I've done something has changed, and it makes me feel really, I don't know, it makes me feel good, and I got a kick out of it too. So yeah, the reason why I wanted to show that picture is to just illustrate how I was someone who could not imagine transitioning. And, it's been sort of baby steps every step of the way, but within the course of 7 years, I didn't start transitioning in that particular moment. It was a couple years after that. But I was already thinking about my trans identity then and well before that picture was taken. So I just kind of wanted to share that and illustrate that, sometimes it can feel so excruciatingly long, the process of transition. But when you add up all the baby steps and you lay them out on the table and you look back, you start to realize how those small baby steps have added up to become this huge fundamental shift in changing your gender and changing how your body looks and how you socialize in the world and how you even just feel in your own body. And those things are very exciting to look back on and see how far someone can come in this journey. And I think that everyone is capable of having a successful transition. I just think it's a matter of appreciating the time that it takes to just learn about who you are and what are the best steps, and not comparing yourself or feeling a sense of pressure to do or be a certain way. So I think that the other thing I would recommend is to see a therapist. I think friends and family are great support systems, but a therapist is truly a sounding board and an objective player in your life. That is a unique relationship that is unlike anything else that you could have in your life. And if you have a good relationship with your therapist, I think that that is a great tool to have in your arsenal. And I also think that it's important, and I guess I'm speaking from my own experience, but I think this is true for a lot of people. One of the biggest barriers I had to deal with was the shame of being seen as a man in a dress or being seen as someone who looked ridiculous, especially when I was first starting to transition. I'm going to include some photos now of some really some really cringeworthy moments, but I kind of want to put that out there so that other people can see, again, I'll speak on behalf of myself. There are definitely going to be growing pains if you're someone who is a bit binary in their approach to transition. As an AMAB person, facial hair removal and just kind of getting used to different sort of silhouettes and shapes and, I was so worried all the time that I looked like a male rock star or something, and that's not who I am, obviously, but I'm neither a rock star nor a male, but I think that there's an aesthetic similarity sometimes between sort of glam rock and AMAB people who are trans femme or trans female, and it's just this fear that I had personally that I was going to be reflecting something that wasn't aligned with my identity or my gender. So just a little personal anecdote just to kind of illustrate some of the growing pains that you may experience if you are going to have a similar journey that I went through and still go through. And then the last thing I would say is to find terminology that feels comfortable for you. I think that there is a plethora of information and narratives and a spectrum of stories out there of the types of ways that you can identify and navigate gender. So for example, I find it hard to say I am a woman, because I think that sometimes, to me, a lot of times the word woman can hold so much baggage. I think it was Julia Serrano in her book Whipping Girl who had mentioned that, it sort of takes time to become a woman and the experiences that come with that. And it's not about, what's between your legs or anything like that. It's more about, I think, the experiences you have as a person, and becoming a woman the same way it is, for cis women. It's a process, and it takes time, and it needs breathing room, and it doesn't happen overnight. And, especially for trans femme people who are, transitioning later in life, I think it's something really important to remember. Even though there's been a lot of time that's passed where you haven't necessarily maybe lived your most authentic self or, embodied the gender you feel you are, but don't stifle yourself or not give yourself the time to really have the space to grow into yourself in a really meaningful way so that it feels like authentic and true to who you are and not just kind of white knuckling it, so to speak, and pushing through and feeling inauthentic. I think that that's an important thing to remember, is that it's a trans feminine, speaking on behalf of myself and people who are AMAB and trans femme, it's a trans feminine journey. It's not, I'm a woman, or I'm a man, or I'm not, non-binary, boom. Like, I think it just takes time to grow into your identity and your sense of self and your sense of style. Especially if you hadn't had that time to do so when you were growing up. And now, you're finally starting to do that. So that would be my advice for anyone who is asking the question, how do I know if I'm trans? It's a personal journey. There's a lot of narratives and inspiration out there, but ultimately the buck stops with you, and everyone is going to be able to make the choices that are best for themselves. And if you give it that breathing room and if you give it that time, there's really no way you can go wrong. I think that's really the best advice I can give as someone who has now been transitioning for quite some time and has experienced a lot of highs and lows and all that's in between. So I hope that is helpful for anyone who is looking at videos about, asking. I know that a lot of times there's questionnaires and there's these things like, if I were on an island and, no one else was around, would I transition? And I think those are helpful thought starters, but I don't necessarily think they always ground themselves in the reality of how we all experience gender in a really real way in 2019, in whatever city you might be living in, with whatever experiences you might have had as a child, with the type of support system you have around you. So yeah, it's an extraordinarily complicated thing, but if you can have patience and give yourself the time and know that there's going to be challenges that come up with either shame or fear or safety or these things that are really hard to grapple with, I think that there's always a way to navigate that and to do it where you come out on the other side stronger and that much more comfortable in your skin and your authentic self. So that is everything I wanted to say today. I hope very much that this is a helpful video for someone out there. If you would like to reach out or to talk at all about your own gender journey, please feel free to reach out to me via email, which is in the About section. I'm happy to, talk to you offline and kind of talk about, what questions, concerns, challenges that you're facing, and if I can offer any advice or help along the way, or maybe vice versa. I think that could be a really great way to continue this dialogue and to help each other as trans people and gender nonconforming people. Okay, that is it. Thank you so much and have a wonderful rest of the weekend. Bye.